Hey everybody, HomeSliceHenry here, and in today's video we're taking a first look at a brand new Pokemon in the world of Pokemon GO, Colossal. Colossal evolves from Ludicolo, which you can encounter in the wild, or how I got mine, via a remote raid invite. Colossal is a fire and rock type Pokemon with absolutely monster stats. It is bulkier than Great League Galarian Corsola. For the moves, we're looking at Fire Spin and Smackdown as the fast moves, and for the charge moves, Flame Charge and Rock Slide. So without further ado, let's hop onto the matches, and let's take a look at this bulky beast in action in the Open Great League. Hopping to the first match, picking up a very nice lead of Malamar into Credilli. Malamar enjoys a pretty nice pacing advantage in this matchup, overfarming quite a bit and baiting with the foul play right before they make the Rock Tomb. Shield comes up from Credilli, they immediately undertap the Rock Tomb, but since I'm running the non-Shadow Malamar, I don't have to respect it. Opponent tries for a superpower catch onto Sableye that would have been devastating, but I'm able to hold on to my energy, bank back-to-back foul plays for later, and send in Corviknight. Now this is my attack-weighted Corviknight, meaning that it is about to get absolutely deleted by these foul plays. Sableye's foul play damage, even from a non-Shadow, just hits so incredibly hard. I don't really want to win this mid-game. My goal is just to try and get the Sableye low, and then set up farm for Colossal. Because that way I'll have Colossal up energy, I'll have Malamar up energy, and hopefully that will be good enough to win the game. In comes Colossal, opponent pivots into Credilli, and I have all this energy on my Malamar. Malamar fires off the superpower, big damage, I throw one in the move, but they undertap the Rock Tomb. This is honestly preferred. I'm more than happy to let the energy go. Losing that Malamar energy just gives farm to Colossal. Colossal is basically at full HP, but has an entire flame charge of energy for free, and in comes Galarian Corsola. Now, my Colossal is from Raid, so it doesn't have the greatest IVs, but a high-ranked Colossal actually has more bulk than a Galarian Corsola. Corsola will fire off a Nightshade, and that just does not do a lot. They could have gone for a super effective Power Gem, but even that, Colossal would have very easily survived. I now go for the boosted Rock Slide. That's going to set up a farm down for Colossal. Opponent makes a last-second charge attack on this Corsola, but it's just too little too late. Sableye's too low. It does not have energy. Colossal farms down, and that's a good game. We've got mirror leads in the next match, Malamar versus Malamar. Now this matchup, outside of the blinding Psy Waves, is a pretty nice lead for me, considering that I really don't want my Colossal in the back to see this Malamar. In the non-Shadow Malamar mirror, 2 foul plays will actually not take the knockout. Even a foul play into a superpower, I should be able to hang on because I have a very high rank Malamar. But I don't really want to debuff myself. Instead, I would rather keep myself a little bit healthy and then look to pivot out depending on what my opponent decides to send in. They go for superpower, they send in Marowak, and I'm very happy that I was able to respond to that with the Corviknight, as Corviknight is going to do fine in this matchup, whereas Colossal would take double super effective damage and get slapped all the way down. My opponent, they're probably not going to be baiting a Corviknight, but I need to get rid of the Marowak, so I put up the shield. I know that they do not get knocked out by an Air Cutter, so I'm full sending the Payback. Payback lands as the opponent tries to call the bait, and in the back is Dunsparce. Unfortunately, this is not getting any easier, as Dunsparce's Drill Run will hit for double super effective damage onto Colossal. I farm up, fire off the Air Cutter, no shield from my opponent. The good news is I won't get knocked out by a Rock Slide, but the bad news is I did not get that Air Cutter boost. Rock Slide is going to land. Corviknight now very, very low. I farm up a ton of energy, and I'm going to go for the Air Cutter bait. The bait is successful. There's the boost, and now I will get a boosted Air Cutter. Boosted Air Cutter is going to land, and I was able to get a lot of damage onto Dunsparce. In comes Colossal. Opponent waits the turn and launches the Drill Run. That's big damage, but Colossal is able to hang on. Colossal, farm it up. I'm just firing off the Flame Charge. I want to boost up my Fire Spins to help me farm down. Flame Charge does get shielded. There's the switch to Malamar. Malamar gets farmed down by the boosted Fire Spins. Dunsparce does not get the double up, and we're able to take the win. Malamar into Stunfisk in the next match, and this is one of the matchups why I decided to run the regular Malamar, because the Shadow Malamar just straight up loses to Stunfisk, because 2 Mud Bombs plus the Thunder Shocks knock you out, whereas the non-Shadow Malamar can actually hang on, surviving both Mud Bombs, and winning switch advantage against Stunfisk is really nice, considering my backline isn't a particular fan of that Pokemon. My opponent fires off another Mud Bomb, and again, I'm very comfortable letting this go and looking to overfarm quite a bit. Opponent safe switches into Wigglytuff, and I make a misplay. I should have brought in Colossal. Colossal could have just ramped up against this Wigglytuff and completely destroyed it, but this was one of my first battles with this team, and in the moment I panicked. I saw Fairy, I clicked Steel type, and then the moment I clicked Corviknight, I immediately had regrets because this would be the perfect opportunity for Colossal to just ramp up infinite damage with Flame Charge. I do get the Air Cutter boost, which is nice, helping to undo that Icy Wind debuff, and now this Air Cutter will get my opponent very low. They're going to pivot out into Stunfisk. I actually don't want to give up switch advantage here. Instead, I'm just going to stay on the field, go for the Air Cutter, get another boost. It does not let me get a farm down, but my opponent is forced to throw energy. So now I can go for energy lead on Colossal. In comes Colossal. Opponent, they're thinking about it. They're going to be sending in Cradily. Cradily is a rock type. They're going to hit me for super effective damage with Rock Tomb, but this is where the bulk of Colossal comes in clutch. Because Rock Tomb, I'm able to tank that pretty comfortably, and my opponent does not have a lot of fast move pressure. Add to that the fact that I can undo that Rock Tomb debuff with a Flame Charge, and suddenly, this is a pretty interesting endgame. I'm slowly ramping up my damage as my opponent slowly debuffs me, so I'm pretty consistently staying at a normal attack. I decide to go for the Rock Slide here because it is a cheaper attack. The thing my opponent will have to watch for is I do have a charge attack loaded on the Malamar. So the question is, when will I go for the Snipe? They go for another Rock Tomb. I undertap so they don't get the catch, and now they have to decide. If they shield, they have to try and predict the combo. They no shield, they get Fire Spun down. In comes Wigglytuff, that gets Fire Spun down as well, and Colossal sweeps the endgame. Very neutral lead in the next match, Malamar into Ludicolo. I assume I lose to zeros if my opponent ends up firing off the Leaf Storm, but they don't go for it. Instead, they're sacrificing the ability to potentially get a one-hit KO in exchange for just getting some good chip damage. So my opponent clearly just wants the Malamar low, as I don't really have an incentive to shield up the Weather Ball. But I want to preserve my Malamar's energy, so I make a catch, catching the Weather Ball onto my Corviknight. My opponent is going to send in their own Corviknight, and I'm going to be farming up a ton of energy. They're going to be connecting with a payback. That's going to be getting me very, very low, but I get to return fire with a payback of my own. This payback is obviously going to be doing some very nice damage onto my opponent, and let's see, will they overfarm too much? No, they overfarm exactly perfectly, immaculate counting for my opponent, and they take the knockout with Air Cutter, and they get the boost. Normally, Sand Attack, even when double super effective, isn't the scariest fast move ever, but at +1 attack, that could be a very different story. I send in Colossal. Honestly, I'm taking the Sand Attacks better than I thought I would. Opponent tries for a catch onto Ludicolo, but I hold onto my energy and farm them all the way down. In the back is Florges, and this could get a little bit tricky. Florges can hit for double super effective with their Chilling Water. I'm going to throw on Alignment, anticipating my opponent to go for good timing, but they read me like a book, and they fire off that charge stack instantly. I was hoping to get a boost before they were able to lower my attack back down with the Chilling Water. Flame Charge is going to land, and this damage is really starting to add up. Florges sends in the Corviknight. I have to no shield. They have the Chilling Water banked. Payback does not take the knockout. Colossal too bulky. My opponent will immediately undertap the Chilling Water, firing it right away. But I have the Flame Charge locked and loaded, so this game will be a win. Even a Raid IV, remote raided Colossal, is still very, very bulky, and we're able to secure that game. We see a familiar lead in the next match, Malamar versus Malamar, but this time, unfortunately, my opponent's Malamar is Shadow. That makes this matchup quite a bit worse, because I'm intentionally running a very bulky Malamar with low attack. That means I'm highly likely to lose charge attack priority, and if one of the Malamars is Shadow, as you can see, you just get two-shot by the foul plays. So this is definitely not ideal. I go for a catch onto Corviknight, saving energy on my Malamar. Corviknight is still going to take some massive damage from foul play. I did sneak, which means that I will actually be able to outpace here. I get to the Air Cutter, and I think Air Cutter can probably knock out the Shadow. Malamar puts up the shield, no boost comes through for the Corviknight. Corviknight getting to Air Cutter number 2, but my opponent reveals they have a Zoomerl in the back, and this is a pretty big problem. I do get the boost, which is basically the only thing that could save me at this point, because Malamar plus Colossal has a big core breaker, and its name is Azumarill. Well, I guess also Florges, but somehow Florges into Malamar isn't as bad as one might think. I really have to CMP tie the Azu with the Malamar here, so I'm going to farm up, switch in, but unfortunately I don't click the button in time and I'm forced to go down a shield. That is a pretty massive error on my part, as if I CMP tied, then I wouldn't have had to shield. I could have just let it go and had 2 shields for Colossal in the endgame. And Colossal definitely needs 2 shields, because my opponent has a ton of energy banked on that Shadow Malamar. So I'm going to be waiting down the timer here, because I know my switch clock is not up yet. sending in Colossal, taking a double super effective bubble, and now my opponent brings back in the Mala. I try for the catch, and I do not get it, and unfortunately, they survive that fire spin as well. So at this point, I basically resigned myself to the fact that I will lose this game. I'm going to play it out to the bitter end. Maybe they could have, I don't know, a Whimsicott or something in the back. It's Corviknight, and I am kicking myself. If I CMP-tied this superpower with their Ice Beam, I could have just let it go. I would have had 2 shields for Colossal, and Colossal would have very comfortably won this game. But unfortunately, I did not. And that imprecision in the mid-game comes back to bite me, as my Colossal is just too low, and I end up losing that game. Very bad lead in the next match, Malamar into Shadow Drapion. I have not seen a Shadow Drapion in quite some time, but unfortunately, it's a pretty big core breaker for this team. I'm going to farm up a ton of energy, bait with the foul play, and then go for a catch onto Corviknight. Drapion is an absolute nightmare for this team, as obviously Aqua Tail will hit for double super effective into Colossal, so I'm going to have to be extremely mindful with how I use my shields in this game. Drapion will go for the crunch. I'm farming up. My opponent fires off energy. And honestly, I think it's better that I didn't throw the air cutter. Because my opponent threw instantly, now I can bring in the Malamar and go for farm. My opponent pivots out into Marowak, and a bad scenario gets even worse, as there's just nowhere for Colossal to go. Foul play is going to land. I think they might barely survive the foul play, so I will go for Superpower. Superpower takes the knockout, down goes Marowak, and that is a big KO. In the back, it's Annihilate, and unfortunately, there was just nowhere for Colossal to go. This is absolutely devastating. They're going to be boosting up with the Rage Fist. Unfortunately, Colossal's bulk is actually working against it here, because it's going to give my opponent even more counters of energy. I boost up, the fire spins do get it low, but now I bring in the Malamar. My opponent is now going to put themselves at +2 attack. These counters are going to hurt. They stay in the matchup. They realize they can't get the farm down. They pivot into the Drapion, and they may have just found the lose con in this game. Superpower takes the knockout. We Psywave down Annihilate, and somehow, against the team with 3 counters to Colossal, we're able to emerge victorious and take the win. Great lead in the next match, Malamar into Satitan. Satitan farming up a ton of energy, and Satitan does win charge attack priority over Malamar, so we both farm up to back-to-back. Icicle Spear deals devastating damage. I go for the superpower because it will knock out from this health range, but Satitan puts up the shield, and unfortunately Satitan predicts that I don't fire off my energy. If I had expected them to go for the extra, I could have thrown the superpower. It would have been -1, but it would have done some pretty nice damage and gotten them quite low, and then I could have pivoted out. But instead, I have a move banked on the Malamar, but now my opponent is able to preserve that Satitan for later and send in for Alligator. If this is Satitan double water, I'm in a ton of trouble. No air cutter boost means that unfortunately Payback will not be enough to take the knockout. Payback is going to get for Alligator very low, but for Alligator is able to hang on. And considering this Satitan lead, it's highly likely it's double water in the back, because obviously Satitan really doesn't like to see fire types. So I'll take the Fire Spin head start, and it's Tentacruel in the back, and unfortunately, barring any kind of a miracle, this game is absolutely over. Colossal, while it can survive a Scald from full HP, I'm just going to slowly take too much fast move damage here to the point where it's going to put me into Scald range. I fire off the Rock Slide. Rock Slide does do some pretty nice damage. I'm forced to fire this Rock Slide here right away, otherwise my opponent could outpace. Rock Slide lands, I switch Malamar, my opponent waits the turn, I don't get the Psywave down, and that's going to cost me 1 win con. My opponent doesn't know where my energy's at, but they throw right before Malamar is able to get that foul play. Perfect counting from my opponent, and unfortunately, Colossal, even though I'm still very, very healthy, I think I'm in range. Scald is double super effective. It's a very efficient attack. Scald KOs Colossal, and unfortunately, we do lose that game. We've got Spice from the opponent in the next match, Malamar into Pachirisu. Now, Pachirisu, I absolutely have to keep away from my Corviknight. This Corviknight, obviously, even with super effective stand attacks, would get completely shredded. I shield up, expecting a Thunderbolt, but unfortunately, I get baited by the Pachi. This matchup is really tough for Malamar, because I just really feel like I'm not doing any kind of meaningful damage. The Psywaves don't add up, the foul plays don't add up, and Pachirisu is getting some really consistent damage on me with Thunder Punch. I'm going to try for a foul play into a farm down here. It's going to be close, but I think that I can get it. Malamar doesn't get the farm down. Pachirisu hangs on. The bulky squirrel just too much for Malamar. And I had basically resigned myself to losing the game until they hard switched a Shadow Talonflame. This was basically my only way back in this game, is if they save switch something that I had an incredibly dominant matchup into. And Colossal, being a rock fire type, is resisting everything that Talonflame can throw. Talonflame will go for the fly. They're going to be going for fly number 2 now, as they look to try and get damage onto Colossal. The good news for me is I do have a move banked on Malamar, so I'm going to try and go for a snipe here. Rock Slide gets the shield, in comes Malamar, and I catch the mid-incinerate. This is not super effective, but foul play hits very hard. Down goes Shadow Talonflame, and in the back they have Furret, and Malamar is just taking over. Superpower, bang, big damage onto the Furret, and unfortunately Furret's not gonna like what it sees in back as in comes Corviknight. Corviknight just a wall to Furret's energy. This Furret actually on Brick Break, I take it back. They're on the Holiday Cup moveset, so they are on Brick Break. They can at the very least hit for neutral damage, but unfortunately Corviknight is just too healthy. Corviknight farms down everything, and that's a good game. And now some final thoughts on Colossal and its potential place in the current Open Great League meta. Well, to start with, its stats are an incredible starting point. Being bulkier than a Great League Galarian Corsola, which requires all of the XLs in the world to build, and only being like level 23 or level 24 to max for the Open Great League, it has unbelievably good stats. It's super bulky, and best of all, it's really easy to get. You don't need a lot of candies to power it up. There's no XL candies, so it's a very accessible Pokemon, which is a very big win. However, the typing is where things start to trend a little bit more negative. We've seen rock fire types before in Magcargo. Obviously, Magcargo's stats are nowhere close to that of Colossal, but Magcargo has largely been limited to more of a gimmick team mon or kind of like a limited meta threat, just because that rock fire typing, it has so many weaknesses. And a really unfortunate double weakness at that. Well, actually 2 double weaknesses to ground and water, which are 2 of the most common typings. Its moveset, I think, is pretty fine. Fire Spin is a pretty average fast move, and Rock Slide and Flame Charge are very, very good charge moves. Like Rock Slide, with the buff a few seasons back, is now pretty solid, and obviously being able to boost your attack up with Flame Charge is really nice, because Colossal's attack stat is very, very low. So I think it's a pretty solid Pokemon. I think it's going to see more Go Battle League play than competitive play, but overall, I think it's a very solid addition to the meta. And in my eyes, I think it's going to be more anti-meta than meta, just because of some of those limitations, specifically that typing kind of being very feast or famine. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoy watching content like this, please do consider leaving a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you have not. And an extra special thank you as always to our channel members here on YouTube. The support you guys provide is genuinely so appreciated. So thank you guys oh so very much. And until next time, I've been HomeSliceHenry.